Hey yo, what's good, my Essential Warrior? It's your boy Sparking Esencia coming at you with another video. And today, I'm gonna be talking about some videos that have recently been uploaded by the community. And I'm talking about KTY Legends and Christian Seda's tier list for Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, mostly focusing on single battles. Now, I'm gonna start by saying that in my opinion, we need more videos like this since it kinda breaks the cycle of the whole content of the game mainly being centered around PvP gameplay. So first, I'm gonna talk about KTY Legends tier list, which in this case, it was made in collaboration with Hardy Boys and Unk Nation. So, shout out to them as well. Now, this is a very good tier list since they take a look at the entire roster from a competitive standpoint and place them on their respective tier according to what they all three come to agree. And overall, they have a fair judgment of the characters when it comes to placing them on their respective tier. However, in my humble opinion, and I mean no disrespect by any means to KTY Legend, Unk Nation, or Hardy Boys, but I believe that this tier list is flawed to some extent. And let me explain why. But before I get into it, I'm gonna say that we're not gonna be taking lag into account. And we're also not gonna be taking into account the individual player skill. So don't be nitpicky just for the sake of making an argument. And also, being completely real, if you're actually good at the game, if you actually have some level of actual skill in the game, and if you actually know what the fuck you are doing instead of just spamming punch banish and super attacks just hoping just to land one, then you can realistically go out there and get wins with characters like Pansy, who is actually one of the weakest characters in the game. This game was designed to be unbalanced, to basically allow any character to win even though they may be at a disadvantage right from the start. And in a lagging match, every possible skill or normal fighting scenario just goes out the window since at that point, you really can't control your character and the flow of the battle just gets completely disrupted. So, back to the tier list. In my opinion, this tier list is overly focused on what I call a single character playstyle. And what do I mean by that? I mean that they don't take into account the transformation factor of the characters. Now don't get me wrong, man. The tier list itself is good. It gives you a good general view of where each character stands by its own. It's a very good tier list for people with this single character playstyle, meaning that they choose the character they want to play right from the start instead of transforming into said character mid-battle, which is not wrong by the way. It's just a different way of playing the characters that you actually enjoy playing, alright? There's nothing wrong with that. But we do have to remember that the characters now get a buff for transforming mid-battle. And I know, the buff itself is not game-breaking level strong, and most players in this game only play by using the stuff that breaks the game the most, because otherwise they just can't play the game like a normal human. But anyways, let's just not get sidetracked. Even though the buff itself may not be super strong, it may still be the difference between winning or losing something as simple as a mirror match just by the fact that you were doing or receiving more damage due to the transformation buff alone. And you can also give yourself an advantage over characters with the same or lower DP than your starting character. You can also pretty much exceed or close the power gap between your opponent and your starting character if your opponent is running a higher DP character than you are. As an example, if your opponent is running Gogeta Blue right from the start and you start off with Super Saiyan Gogeta from Super and transform into Super Saiyan Blue mid-battle, then you might just end up winning the battle just by the fact that you were doing more damage, even though that you both essentially had the same character. Plus, any new buff your transformed state receives through its abilities will stack over this transformation buff, and by extension, it'll make your damage output even higher, even if it's by a little bit. In the long run, the extra damage will be there, and it just means that you'll go through your enemy HP bars that much quicker. And don't get me wrong, this is a good tier list, and it can be very useful to rate characters by their own standalone viability. And if you're a heavy singles player that doesn't usually go for transformations mid-battle, then this tier list is most likely for you. So I'm gonna leave a link down in the description so you guys can go check it out. Just be mindful that since the game has 208 characters, the tier list is bound to be a bit lengthy since they do go through each character one by one. And now, let's talk about Christian Seda's tier list. And he actually mentioned something very interesting, and in all honesty, I agree with him on this one. But before getting into that, I want to say that there was a slight character misplacement in this video. I talked to Christian about it, and he addressed that in the next video, which is also a tier list, but now focusing on DP battles. So I'm gonna be leaving a link down in the description below so you can go see that video as well. Okay, back to the main topic real quick. Christian basically says that we should think of characters in a similar way to the competitive Pokemon scene. And before I get into it, first I'm gonna let Christian Seda explain that himself.
Now, in my opinion, people think of these characters kind of like a traditional fighting game, and in my opinion, that's a mistake. We should think about these characters more similar to the competitive Pokemon scene. What do I mean by that? In Pokemon, we know we have over 300 characters at this point. Some of them are extremely overpowered. If you know anything about Pokemon, there's legendary Pokemon with higher stats and better moves, etc. Kind of similar to Sparking Zero, okay? Our legendary Pokemon here would be the Beerses, the Weezes, the Gogetas. So people building tournaments for Pokemon have taken this into account and created tiers in which Pokemon of the same level can compete in a fair environment. Okay, we have the Uber category, the OU category, the underused category, etc. That's how they do it, and I feel like Sparking Zero should take the same strategy. Okay, there's characters that should not be fighting each other in tournaments. That is very obvious. For example, we know if a tournament includes Beerus, Kid Buu is just gonna be an unviable character in that format.
So, as you just heard from Chris's explanation, this game actually does have something in common with Pokemon, and that's the fact that both of them were basically made without character balance in mind on purpose. His tier list is pretty good, but Christian doesn't go over every single character like KTY Legend does. Christian gives a more overall view and basically introduces us to what the tiers themselves mean and what types of characters fit in those tiers, judging them by their combat tools. This being their abilities, combo strings, and the ability to transform into a stronger character. So, if you're the type of player that likes to transform mid-battle and utilize your character kit to the fullest, then this is the tier list for you. But, since it misses some of the characters, it may not be as beginner friendly if you don't already know most of the characters' kits. But, if you're somewhat knowledgeable of the game, then you should have no trouble finding yourself in that tier list. Hey, wanna hear a funny joke? What's the main difference between Pokemon and Dragon Ball Sparking Zero? That Pokemon actually has a consolidated competitive scene that has been going on for almost 30 years. The first ever Pokemon World Championships were held in Sydney, Australia in September of the year 2000, which is actually older than me by basically 1 month since I was born later on October 31st. So it's actually kinda crazy to think that the Pokemon competitive scene is already older than some of the people watching this video. So how come Pokemon already has a consolidated competitive scene that has been going on for such a long time, even though the game is purposely unbalanced and Sparking Zero doesn't have it? Well, as Christian Seda said, in the competitive Pokemon scene, there are Pokemon that are banned from specific tournaments due to them not being in the specific tier the tournament is going for. There are even cases of some Pokemon being tournament banned in general, meaning that no matter what tier, you just can't get into a tournament with that specific Pokemon. Ain't that shit right, Mega Ray Quasar? As a matter of fact, they had to create a whole other tournament tier called Anything Goes in order for this character to be able to get into tournaments. And if you don't know that much about Pokemon and you think this comparison is bullshit, then trust me, competitive Pokemon it's much more complex than you think, since you have to take into account a lot of variables that affect the stats of your Pokemon. And honestly, I could go on and on how much complex the competitive Pokemon chain actually is, but this is not a video about Pokemon, and I'm not a Pokemon channel. So let's get right back into the main topic.
Hijo de puta madre, stick with the fucking topic, bro.
In order for this game to have a consolidated competitive scene, in my opinion, we need to stop looking at this game's competitive scene as if it was Dragon Ball FighterZ, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, or any other classic fighting game. Sparking Zero is not that kind of game, and it's unproductive to just compare it to this other game games, since the only thing that they have in common is that they're all fighting games. And even then, there are different types of fighting games. You have Dragon Ball Fighters, Street Fighter, and Mortal Kombat, for example, that are classic 2D fighting games. And then you have Sparking Zero, which is a more modern concept, which is 3D Arena Fighter. Since the classic 2D fighters are fundamentally different to Sparking Zero, we can't expect for the game's competitive scene to work the same way. We need to approach this game's competitive scene the same way a game like Pokemon does, making specific tournaments for specific tiers so everybody can fight in a much more fair and competitive environment. And that's basically it for this video, guys. Let me know what tier list do you prefer, and if you're the type of player that likes to transform mid-battle, or the type of player that goes with the characters he wants to use and doesn't usually go for transformations mid-battle. I would actually like to see your opinions on this one. Also, I recently opened a Discord server, so be sure to join so we can all chill and eventually build up a community to keep this game alive and possibly even organize some tournaments in the future. Who knows? Who knows? Anyways, leave a like and let me know what are your overall thoughts on this video down in the comments. Also, don't forget to subscribe and also join the Discord to officially be a part of the Essential Warriors. It's been your boy Sparking Esencia, and I'll be seeing y'all in the next one. Peace out, everybody.
Buena sesión de entrenamiento.